the beginning of the start of Maintain a Positive Attitude. And this is basically the start of kind of a 2-week series of workshops. And the big thing that we just did is we went through an intro sheet. So this intro sheet just kind of asks your name, your age, where you're born, where you live now, what was your worst job, what was your favorite job, what superpower could you have, comfort levels of change. We are recording this today, but you gentlemen, feel free to ask me any questions that you maybe have. Again, only audio recording, and we're only presenting the slides right here. I think a big thing and a big reason why I like to garner off this like little intro sheet that we have here, because today we're talking about maintaining a positive attitude. And a lot of people coming through this office or this workshop, typically speaking, they're a part of some kind of program that's trying to get them back into work. You know, maybe that's promise jobs like I'm going through. So it's kind of a transitioning program off of state benefits or off of cash assistance. It could be those people that are in voc rehab that maybe experience some kind of injury or something that they need to get retrained or have some kind of resource navigation so they can get a job that accommodates whatever their abilities might be able to do. But a big thing, and I think a lot of the people that we see in here are people getting unemployment benefits. And now what I know is to get unemployment benefits, you generally have to lose your job to no fault of your own, right? So Iowa is a right to hire, right to fire state. So for the most part, unless it's that like really protected category of whatever the kind of subject matter might be, you know, if it's my sexual orientation, if it's my marital status, those things are generally protected. But if it's not one of those categories, you know, you come in, I say, James, I'm so tired of you wearing purple every day to work. I'm going to let you go. So
you give me the highest in seniority and get the highest vacation all of a sudden, and you're the oldest one in there, and they target you and not stop keep bringing you up in your bargain.
So you could get, and do you think employers ever, you know, aim at looking for things to get rid of people? You know, I'm sure that does happen sometimes. So, and I think that could even be a little bit tougher, James. I mean, if we're there for, you said you worked at your last job for 19 years, right? And that's 18 years. These are some of the reasons why I think we asked the questions on this worksheet, because to deal with change, sometimes people come through this office and they get a layoff kind of consistently. You know, their line of work, they're used to this type of stuff. So they've experienced these little layoff periods. You know, maybe I bounced around a lot. I'm just thinking if I'm the type of person, like, for example, I grew up in a military family, or I was just kind of transient, and I went here to here to here, and I lived.
It's not my choice.
What's that?
It's not my choice that you change jobs.
Well, it's not your choice that you showed up here too as well. But I think the idea is some people have been through it before. Some people like you that maybe I worked at the last place for 18 years, that might be a little bit more uncomfortable for me to deal with, you know? So I think about job search in general or losing our job. It's just a lot harder for people if you stuck somewhere for a long time, if you're not really used to a ton of change. You know, if I'm Mitchell and I grew up in Des Moines, I've always lived in Des Moines and I had the same job for the last 20 years. That was my friend group. That was my social circle. I had a certain amount of vacation time. It's a lot harder to deal with, you know. I definitely think it is. So 5 weeks, huh? So when we talk about change, 2 different types of change, external change versus internal change. And there's really easy examples that we have going on today, you know. And so when I'm talking about external change versus internal change, I'm talking about like what are the forces that drive change in our life. So I'm not talking about something changes in your appearance or something changes on your inside or anything like that, right? So kind of about how change comes about, the forces. Do you guys have any idea of what I'm talking about, external change, internal change? So I'll say the coronavirus that we're all dealing with, it's like the elephant in the room, right, is an example of external change. Nobody asked for that, right? Nobody even, just up until last week, nobody expected it. And now these dominoes are starting to fall and everything's been canceled and all. And how do we deal with that? Well, it's unexpected. We haven't dealt with it before.
You have no choice in that.
You don't have any choice. And that's kind of, so external change is kind of the world imposing its will on you. So if external change is an external force causing it, what's an internal change?
What attitude do you have when you get up in the morning?
Well, it could be it. But even sometimes when we talk about change in our life in general, sometimes people decide to go back to school. You know, sometimes people decide to move cities. Sometimes people decide something's not working in their life and they want to do something different. And those are usually things that we stew on for a little bit, that we plan for, that we prep for. So I think just all things considered, you're dealing with a period of external change. This is tough, especially if we're not used to it. And then think about what your comfortability with change is too. Think about, we do a whole class on personality styles. Some people really thrive off regularity. You know, I get up, I know where I'm going. doing the same thing, seeing the same people. I like a schedule, I like a regimen. And if I don't have that anymore, that can be really tough for people sometimes too. But that's just kind of why I bring up external change, internal change, your comfortability with change. I think if you consider all these things objectively, then it can really help you kind of maybe understand your situation a little bit without you being too kind of, too negative on yourself, I think is the whole idea behind this. And we only have 2 people in this room today. We're dealing with some extra stuff going on too, which I think has prevented some of that general public for coming in here. But typically speaking, especially when we do our orientation class, which we do 3-4 times a week, there's 30 people in that room, so it's kind of like a revolving door. And I think it's very easy to sit at home and think it's only happening
Yeah,
to
there
you.
was like not a desk that wasn't used.
Right?
Well, I was told if I didn't come, they wouldn't give me my unemployment benefits.
It could be like a ready and available thing. So, and I think that's what we're trying to now navigate.
You have a chance to reschedule one time.
Yeah. But what we're trying to navigate is how this new virus kind of affects everything.
Yeah, like I got another one come up on the 19th. Should I not go to it?
I think that'd be a great conversation with you and your Resia worker. What they could probably do and what we're really getting prepared to do, we might be able to send you the video.
Yeah,
So,
that would be.
Yeah.
I mean, why? That's a good answer.
Yeah. So I think that would be they could definitely accommodate you on that one, I suppose. Yeah. And that's what we're going to kind of be gearing towards. But
this is my second one, so I think I'm full. I have to do 2. So.
Yeah, that's right.
You got to do 2.
Yeah.
So the people that are listening at home, maybe in the future, this is one of them, right?
Yeah.
They make you do 2.
But so far, the guy I did like an orientation, not workshop, but the guy that just I sat at a desk and talked with, he was super nice. The guy that did a workshop was super nice, and you seem super nice too. So as far as going to workforces, I can't believe how accommodating you guys are.
Well, that's good to hear. We like to hear that stuff sometimes. I won't make you guys write on any of these things. I'm gonna still pass out the handout. And for those of us listening, what I passed out is there's a handout that is just very similar to this dream life scenario. And I think that the big thing that I like to talk about here, we've always heard things, it's a lot easier to get to where you're going if you know where you want to go. Being really specific in our career, and I don't know where you guys are at in your career search, or if you're looking at trying something different, if you're looking to get back into what you were doing before. But I think being really specific in our path is important. So when we say my dream life, we're thinking about kind of the end, like what's the big picture type of stuff. So whether that's 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, but where do you want to be? Who do you want to be with? What does a typical day look like? Getting to think about these things. And tomorrow we do a whole lot of kind of goal setting stuff. And I think it's really easy to kind of go through life just trying to get from, point A to point B and not really thinking about our overarching goals. And definitely when things come around, everybody has roadblocks. Everybody has obstacles that they have to come over when they're looking for employment. What are some obstacles you think people face with employment? Some easy ones. There's some pretty typical ones out there.
Education.
Education could be a big one. Now,
I have that computer skills.
No, computer skills is a tough one too. So I see people a lot of the times too, and it's a little bit different. So nowadays, if we get any kid my age, just about half of us got liberal arts degrees or whatnot. And I think employers can be a little bit spoiled. We want somebody with a degree. We don't care what it is all the time. Outside of being something really specific for a job that was really technical or something. But we get people, I think that, maybe if it wasn't the most common thing to do, or maybe if the emphasis wasn't as high as it is today, to go pursue that post-secondary education or get that bachelor's degree. I think the same thing. People have really good work experience, and that should supplement that sometimes. But now we're getting to this thing where if the job market's kind of filled with those bachelor's degrees, it's kind of hard to compete against those things. Now, computer skills, that's also really tough. I don't know, I will bring this up so the people at home can see this too, but there are different websites that we can go to.
My wife calls me a pecker because
if
I ever use the computer, it says
Yep.
2 fingers.
So there are.
She said you're a pecker.
There are.
My wife can just wing through stuff.
This website's kind of neat. It's called GCF Learn Free. And basically I can go down here to all topics. And one of the really nice things, they could probably teach you the basics or whatnot on here. We used to, as far as I was been informed, that we used to teach computer classes here, and they don't anymore. And it was before my time, so I don't know if that was based off of attendance, maybe not getting enough people coming in here to take it. But another really tough aspect of that computer class was we might get somebody that comes in here like James, and James is like, hey, my computer skills are lacking, you know. We might get somebody, they're just like, I'm pretty good on the computer, but I really want to learn how to master Excel or something. So people come in from different ranges. But this class is this website's pretty interesting, rather. They have everything on here, any Microsoft Office applications, they have computer basics. There's even stuff on here about resume writing, and we could go all the way to like learning about Photoshop and stuff. So it's GCF Learn Free. And again, it is free.
Cost associated with that?
Nope, not for those ones. You know, there's other websites like Lynda, which is like LinkedIn Learning. There's Skillshare. Those might cost money, but GCF Learn Free holds true to it is free. You know, so it's just online kind of a little bit training. And sometimes people just need to brush up on some of that stuff. So when we talk about roadblocks, we got computer skills, we got education. You know, other big ones that I see, other obstacles that I might see, and especially with a lot of the clients that I have in my particular program, the Promise Jobs program, transportation. Transportation is going to be a huge one. And I think another thing, you know, as we're trying to figure out all this virus stuff, childcare. You know, how does childcare work? And from what I've heard, and we're here in Des Moines, but if you go any more rural than that, childcare can be a huge detriment for a lot of people. You know, whether it's the cost.
I have my stepdaughter and my grandkids that live with me, and I didn't think about that. And she uses childcare.
Yeah, she's got to get childcare.
Yeah.
So, are you saying you have somebody at home to watch your kids, or?
Since I've been
hired. Yeah.
I've been helping out a lot, but still, but I can't all the time. I mean, I have to come to things like this and stuff like that. And so,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
But she has to figure out things.
But so those are some of the biggest things: having reliable childcare that fits your needs, transportation costs. So it could be a lot of things: childcare, transportation, even this thing, maintain a positive attitude. If we were ever terminated from our last job, that's kind of difficult. You know, I know we're not talking about the interviewing class today, but they say the cardinal sin, or at least I've heard, of interviewing is talking bad about your last employer. You know, maybe this is, you know, my easy to go to correlation, but
I shouldn't mention that, huh?
Well, it's not that you're going to have to bring it up regardless, but sometimes people still seem really upset about it. And that makes sense. You know, but we say, even if you worked for the devil himself, don't badmouth him. You know, don't badmouth him to and my easiest,
because I feel like my heart got torn out.
Yeah. And a lot of people do, but my easiest example, and I don't know why I always correlate to this. If you're on a first date with somebody, who do you not want to talk about? Or a bad mouth, you know, how much you hate that person and they ripped your heart out and everything. Those aren't easy things to do. And I don't imagine that all of your, you know, kind of the whirlwind of emotions that we experience are going to be going away. But it makes me think of, I've seen certain scenarios where there was a gentleman in here, and I don't name names, but there was a gentleman in here one time, and he had lost his last 3 jobs. And I can't remember the specifics. I think he left them. But he would say, you know, this employer, they weren't honest with the amount of commission they said they were going to give me. And then this employer, they weren't honest with the amount of commission they weren't going to give me. And then this employer, so his reasoning was the same on his last 3 employers. Is that possible? Yes. I mean, you know, anything can seemingly be possible within a certain realm of reality.
Seems like he's leaning one way, though.
But it's just, all you have to do is go off of what's right in front of you, you know? And so I think even in those kind of scenarios, you would much rather take the person that says, you know, it didn't work out, but I'm really looking forward to what's next, as opposed to being stuck on what's behind me. Those aren't easy things to do. But that's why we have to get creative a little bit, you know, and that's why just don't badmouth your former employer. If I think of anything, and I don't know why I always compare it, I can only use kind of analogies here sometimes. Even like that question about criminal records, which criminal records can be another thing that sometimes hamper people from finding employment. I've always kind of encouraged people, the way you answer that question is you say, what happened? You explain it, maybe take some culpability, even if it wasn't entirely, you know, something that you did super negative. I could have been in the better place.
It's better to get it out there right after that.
Maybe it's better to get it out there, but I also just tell people, say it and then move on. So you kind of backload that with all the good stuff. So yes, you know, at this date and time, this happened, or I got let go of my job, but here's what I've been doing since then. And here's what I'm excited about going forward in the future. So not always easy to do, not always easy to let go of the past, but it's going to be a lot easier to get through those interviews and get through some of those stressful questions if we think about how do we, you know, display that situation as a learning experience.
At one time, my dad probably did 10 years in prison. He's 80 years old now. And when I talk to him now, when my first ever lose my job, he sits here and tells me, he said, you just got to move on.
Yeah.
He goes, you just get take a step forward.
And it's not easy to do, but I think with everything that you have in front of you, you can hamper yourself just by sticking on it, you know? Not easy to do, definitely not easy to do. But as far as roadblocks, people have a lot of them. And I think what we like to talk about here is just what are the ways we can get creative, you know? If you don't have reliable transportation, is there anybody around you that does? If you don't have childcare, is there a schedule where this type of person could watch your kids at this date? So there's a ton of different things we could do here, but really encourage people to think about alternative routes to solving these problems. So I'm going to blast past this a little bit, but I think, again, with the plan A versus plan B, if we know where we're going, if we know what we want to do, if we have an ultimate goal, I think it is just a lot easier to jump past those obstacles. So one of those things that come around isn't going to stop you entirely because you still know what your end goal is. So actually, right here is I have a handout, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass it out to you, gentlemen. These are famous examples. So these are famous examples of people who have dealt with maybe negative experiences in their life, maybe had points of, quote unquote failure, or they didn't get what they wanted immediately. And so I just wanted to see if we could touch base, and you guys can go ahead and guess if you know who these people are. So I got a handout, and I'm not going to go through the slides quite yet. So we'll give everybody an opportunity to go ahead and look at this handout, okay? And actually, guys, in the interest of time, and since I am recording this up front, maybe we'll just go one by one, because I think it'd be awkward for who's ever listening to this to, it's like pause and stop. So bear with me if you're listening to me just through audio, and we'll just kind of go through these one by one. And I don't have my answer sheet here. I've done this a couple times, so let's cross our fingers that I remember all these things. A famous person who was defeated 7 times while running for political office. I think that could be a couple of different people, probably.
I wish it was Trump.
So this person has actually dealt with a lot of, I've heard, the kind of melancholy throughout their life, had a lot of successes and a lot of failures. Older figure, they were a president at one point in time.
They were a president?
They were a president at one point in time. If I say the Emancipation Proclamation, who comes to mind?
Oh, no, really?
Lincoln
did, huh?
Says Abraham, it was our guy Abraham Lincoln. So I remember that. And apparently there's and I've not looked into this really specifically myself, but yeah, apparently Lincoln had, I think, like high levels of anxiety and depression kind of throughout his life, and just kind of up and down and up and down. But regardless, what are those things that we remember him for? And it's generally not the negative points. So we'll go through the next one. Our cartoonist who was told by the editor of the Kansas City newspaper, "It's easy to see from these sketches that you have no talent." We got a cartoonist.
Delbert?
Huh?
Delbert?
Nope, not that one. I think they just closed down his parks.
Was it?
I think they just closed down his parks. This is our guy Walt Disney.
Really?
So yeah. So we're kind of making that coronavirus reference and just closing down all the I believe they closed down the Disney parks as well. But could you imagine the guy that told Disney he was kind of a talentless hack here, that he didn't have any talent?
I'm thinking of a.
Funny thing is, he may not have had a great talent in cartooning, but he knew how to find people who were.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I don't remember seeing him actually do a cartoon as far as like a comic in a paper.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you specifically, but I guess he got fired from that newspaper, that Kansas City newspaper. We got a Walt Disney quote up there, and then an author whose first children's book was rejected by 23 different publishers. No, that's not a bad guess. He's an author, but he's also kind of known as a doctor.
Oh.
Our guy, Dr. Seuss.
Yes.
Yeah, our guy, Dr. Seuss.
For some reason, Doctor Who came.
Doctor Who.
That's not a real person.
So a famous singer who was fired after his first performance at the Grand Ole Opry.
Rogers.
It is Elvis Presley, actually. So it is Elvis. He was kind of a little out there for his times as well, right? Interestingly enough, though, I think a lot of these people are in kind of creative career pathways, right? So I'm a writer, I'm a singer, cartoonist. These are things that people have to be prepared for rejection in. I haven't heard. Do you guys know who Chris Pratt is?
Yeah.
I remember back in the day hearing something about how he kind of commented on when he was kind of going through odd jobs after college and whatnot. If he went to college or if I don't know his whole life story, but that he was selling coupons from door to door or something of that nature.
I just seen a thing on him. He was selling food out of a truck or something like that in Hawaii or something like that.
Yeah. Oh, I think he was in Hawaii for a while. But yeah, he just said he kind of learned, I think, a lot about rejection, kind of going through that. You try to be a door to door salesman. You could probably learn a lot about rejection.
Everything while he's trying to hone his skill.
And I think one of the things too, and if we just talk about goals in here and stuff, and if I pause just for a moment, I've been in periods of job search. Believe it or not, I got laid off from this office and I got a notice to come in and have one of the assessments that you guys had. I was very familiar with everything that we did in this office. I think a lot of people experience the same thing. So when I was going through job search, I was lucky enough to get hired back here, but I had plenty of jobs that I went and interviewed.
Did you get hired back?
Yes, I did. Yeah. So we got laid off, a contract ended, and that was a tough time. I was lucky enough to get hired back, and I know I had a lot of interviews, and some of those things, it's like you think you're getting really close. I think that can be really tough. That comes up a little bit later, and then you get to know, and it's really easy to get really detrimental on yourself. And whether or not it's employees in this office or staff or clients that are coming through, I see a lot of it happen the same. We've had profiles come out too on how long it takes people to get reemployed. And I can't remember the specifics, so take a lot of things I say with a grain of salt, but I think it's about halfway through their unemployment benefits. So the average is about 27 weeks.
Yeah, I'm starting to get serious now about things. But when I had my job for 18 years, and I didn't leave my bed for a week.
Yeah.
When I first got fired.
Very easy to do. I think where I get into a problem too is when I have bad days, I want the most immediate things I want to go do are the exact things I should not do. So that means go home and lay down and do whatever. Maybe I'll have a drink or what. When I really should go to the gym, right? Like going to the gym is the last thing I want to do, but it actually makes me feel better. I just think I can get into a rut.
I bought me a gym myself because
oh yeah, you got a gym, and it's going to be tougher. I mean, all the YMCA, everything is just about closing down. Yeah.
This is a historic time right now.
It is kind of unprecedented. I've never dealt with it, right? Yeah.
67, never seen anything like it.
Yep. Nor have I. And I don't know if social media also helps kind of proliferate some of this stuff, but I don't know. I think at least it's better to take it seriously and then think we overreacted than it is to think we underprepared. So,
yeah. Rather think that it's going to be bad, be wrong, than the opposite.
Yeah. Yeah. So moving forward, famous actor. If you guys get this one, I will let you go home right now. Unless you want to stay. A famous actress who dropped out of high school and held a variety of odd jobs, including doing the hair and makeup for corpses, before finally succeeding in show business.
Scarlett Johansson.
No.
Barbra Streisand.
No. So this is Whoopi Goldberg. So that's not a super common one that a lot of people get.
Wow.
Or guess at least.
That's pretty interesting.
A famous author who lived on welfare for years in an apartment infested with mice. David, you almost had this earlier, but you just kind of misplaced her.
The lady who wrote the
Harry Potter books?
Harry Potter books, yeah.
Do you remember her name at all?
What's her name? I'm sure I know it. I just can't recall it.
So it is J.K. Rowling.
Right.
Even, and I don't know all the specifics, but even behind the J.K., right? The initials. Do you think women ever, sometimes I think do you think that they're ever discriminated against or maybe less likely to get published or maybe that's why they moved? I'm sure she, was up against some stuff too as well.
Right. Definitely would not know that was
A woman.
really a woman.
It's ambiguous, right?
Mhm.
A famous athlete who was cut from the varsity basketball team his sophomore year in high school. He was also at one time a Chicago White Sox.
Michael Jordan.
It was Michael Jordan. That guy, Michael Jordan. And,
He was cut from a basketball team?
he was in high school at least.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Holy smokes.
An inventor who was thrown out in the early grades because his teachers thought he could not learn.
Wow. Einstein is not an inventor, so I wouldn't say him, so.
Usually it's either Einstein or one other person that people will guess here.
Yeah, see, Einstein didn't invent things, he was a scientist. Inventor would have been somebody like Edison, right?
So Thomas Edison.
Yeah.
I've actually heard he was sent, so he was like sent home from school with a note just saying, we can't help your kid.
Yeah.
You know, handed the note to his mom. Mom, what's the note say? You know, mom turns around and says, they say you're too smart. So I got to, you know, they can't help you there because you're smarter than the rest of the kids. So I got to teach you here. But a famous Harvard dropout. This is one of the, Gates? So this is one of my lesser than favorite ones because it's actually Mark Zuckerberg. No, so it's Mark Zuckerberg.
Oh.
So I
He didn't.
Well, they're both of them are geniuses, and so it's like.
well, yeah. And my only thing is Mark Zuckerberg already kind of had his check in hand when he left. You know what I mean? That's kind of what I think. If you
The case.
did he?
Yeah.
Yeah. Who else? But you know, another person. This person was rejected to. So the University of Southern California has a really good theater program there, or really good outside of theater film production school there, film school. And there was a famous director that was denied entry. Spielberg was denied entry into USC's film school about several times. Yeah, so you look it up. And
You're just full of information.
well, if this is all you got to do every day, right? I guess hopefully you come up with some stuff. But yeah, so Spielberg actually, interestingly enough, and I think now he's an honorary professor. He's got an honorary degree maybe, or does some stuff with the film school there. But an inventor of a fried chicken recipe that was rejected by more than 1,000 restaurant owners. Colonel Sanders, who makes fried chicken around here, right? So Colonel Sanders. So I think a lot of people that had ideas or had ideals even, and, you know, didn't give up after the first time. And there's probably endless examples of this. Guys, I will tell you, typically I like to give a break about halfway through this class. Not knowing how that's going to work with the recording, I'm going to push on through, okay? So it might be a little bit quicker for us even today than usual. Bear with me on that one. If you guys do need to leave the restroom or use the restroom anytime, feel free to do so. But otherwise, I'm going to kind of push through for the sake of the recording. So this is, when we kind of talk about stages of change, really I've heard this graph more so related to reactions to like a dramatic event or even a catastrophe, you know, a catastrophe or catastrophic event or something of that nature. But that's going to be an example of that external change that we were talking a little bit about earlier. So that first thing that happens is denial. I'm going to go back to this COVID-19 thing that we got going on just because it's easy material to talk about. This ain't really happening, right? It's not really going to come here. It's not really going to shut everything down. And then in the past week starting, it's kind of going crazy, right? And now I'm super angry because I don't have any toilet paper in the house or anything like that because everybody's taking it off the shelves. So really what I like to say here, like, kind of make it realistic. Some change is a little bit more, I think, linear in my mind. And when I say linear, it's like the progressions to getting past that change. Job search can be kind of tough. You know, there can be kind of up and down emotions. Probably a lot of stuff goes with that too, but you go through denial. They're not really gonna, you know, I remember they're not really gonna lose the contract or we're gonna be okay or something else is gonna happen. And then, oh my God, this is happening. Well, why me? You know, I worked here for 18 years or I did this, or why did I do anything wrong? Or why not so-and-so? And a lot of those things you have no control over. I remember when we lost the contract, you know, you can think, well, I think I pull my weight around here, but it wasn't arbitrary. You know, the decision was anybody that fell under that contract was gone. So it wasn't always up against some other people. So maybe some of these circumstances can add to our extra like pressure of feeling kind of wronged here or something. And then letting go. So this kind of saying that this is the very reactive. So this first part from denial all the way up to letting go is you're just reacting to what's placed in front of you, right? So you're in your reactive mode, and then this is the proactive mode afterwards.
Does that mean letting go of your anger?
Kind of letting go of the things you can't control. You know, maybe if it's anger, maybe if it's a situation, just kind of everything.
Just recognizing that you can't control it.
Recognizing you can't control it. Yeah. Nothing I can do.
There's nothing I can do about
right?
it.
And
It's something that's happened. It's just let it go.
Yeah. And I think we've all heard that before too. Like, so, you know, there's a couple different quotes. Life is 10% what happens to you, 90% what you make of it. And, you know, a big thing here is, yeah, we can't control it. We can't control the past. And with job search, what I find sometimes too is what can be difficult.
That's one of the best things I've heard so far since I lost my job right there.
What? Just like, don't focus on the things you can't control.
Yeah, yeah. That's there you go.
And you don't. And I mean, you're just going to let those things control you the more you focus on it. But I think too, and what I always like to say here is this has happened to me. You know, when I lost my job, at least I'm thinking all those same bad feelings. And then I'm getting into, okay, now I got to start searching for other jobs, you know, and especially it can be kind of difficult if we had a lot of experience and we expect to make a certain amount of money, or maybe if we were in kind of a niche job and the market out there is just not huge and the opportunities aren't flowing over or anything. But it could be a thing. So I get through all this bad stuff at the beginning, and then I'm like, okay, I need to get back out there. And I start looking for jobs, and I start applying for jobs. I get some interviews over the phone, and then I get this interview. So I'm thinking I had an interview somewhere after I got laid off, and I'm like, this job pays $10,000 more than I was making before. Seems like an advancement. It was another state department too as well. And so there was a lot of crossover, a lot of correlation. It was just a really good job based on what I did before and based on what they were asking for. And you don't find a lot of that. And I went in and I thought I had a really good interview. You know, I thought I did really well. And not every employer calls you afterwards, right? So sometimes you'll get a couple different ways. Like sometimes I found you'll hear nothing. Have you guys ever been, they call it ghosting now, almost professional ghosting. You guys ever interviewed somewhere and you never heard back from them? Yeah. Sometimes you'll get a canned email response. It's kind of generic. Hey, thanks, but no thanks. Or we moved on. Sorry. Keep us in mind in the future. Sometimes you'll get nothing. Sometimes you'll get an email. Sometimes you'll get a phone call. And they actually did call me. This department called me and they said, hey, we really liked you in the interview, but we chose the person that had the job right below your job that already worked for us. Do you think that ever happens? Do you think employers already know who they're going to hire before they go interview for that job?
From where I worked at, they brought them right in the door and they give them the best positions if they wanted to, and one of the highest paid positions if they knew somebody else there.
Yeah.
And they like that person that recommended them or something like that. And so otherwise there's bid jobs and they shouldn't be able to bid on it. And so like the other people in the plant should be able to bid on it and get that job. And they hired people and stuck them right in the highest paid
external people.
as soon as they walked in the door.
Yeah. I think my whole point with that though is I'm sure some company, not that they absolutely know, you know, somebody could still come in and knock their socks off, but they might have a good idea of who they're going to hire already. They might have also, it could have been somebody. And I remember during this same period of time, I remember I interviewed at this job, and I really like to bring up this example because I interviewed at this, it was a more of a healthcare oriented company. And I was interviewing, you know, paid maybe a little bit more than I got before. They had unlimited vacation time. Who doesn't want all that good stuff, right? Not that I don't love where I'm at, 'cause I definitely do. But I had an interview there, and I had a referral there, right? I had a referral there, and I think it's important, just as an aside, to start reaching out to our social groups, because that's how people get jobs. You know, majority of jobs come from personal referrals. You know, they say most jobs aren't even posted online. About 80% of jobs are become part of this hidden job market where you're not finding them on Indeed. You're not finding them on LinkedIn. So that's why I encourage people, at least reach out to your social groups. Get on LinkedIn, try different methods, go to career fairs. But yeah, so I remember, okay, I'm going to get back to my story about the healthcare company, and I interviewed there, and I was kind of touching base with my buddy. Hey, what's going on? Well, we haven't heard anything yet. And I never heard back from the company. And eventually it came down that they hired somebody else, and I figured out through him, and I didn't hear anything back. And you get to a point where it's like, this is upsetting. Nobody can even get back to me. What's wrong with me? Right? Or what's not happening? And I remember telling myself that same story and being so upset for a couple of days at least. And then it comes out a little bit later. Yeah, the girl that we hired is fluent in Spanish. Well, I can speak a little bit of Spanish, but being fluent, being able to, you know, read, write, and do everything really proficiently is probably not something I'm going to hang my hat on. Well, she had that like really specialized skill, and that company really wanted that. I don't think that meant that they liked her inevitably or, you know, entirely more than me, but that was just a thing. And I remember I didn't hear anything back from them, and I got kind of upset. And I'm like, you know, forget about it. Tossed away their business cards, didn't care. 2 months later, my friend says, hey, they really liked you. They want to interview you again. And they came around and offered me that job again. But, you know, I decided to go back to the state where I was comfortable with. But I think that was a good example for me, because I was so upset during that first time. And I told myself the story. You know, I told myself, I'm not great, or I don't have enough experience, or, you know, somebody's outshining me somewhere. And it's not always the case, you know? So I think there's a bunch of different reasons why an employer might pick somebody else. Just because they say no doesn't mean never.
You don't beat yourself up there.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, you can be your own worst enemy, you know? But that was my example, is you sit there and think, you know, all these bad things about yourself or this company or whatever. That company came around and they offered me a job in the future. So keep at it a little bit here. I think I said earlier, you know, it does take people a while to find employment. And not a lot of people are used to rejection. Rejection is not fun. And whether that's from a girl or a guy or a job or whatever, school, nobody likes hearing no. But try not to tell yourself the story with these things. And I think that's the idea. What I always tell people, you know, when you get done with the interview, because it can be really easy, you know, when we're going through these reactive stages, denial, realization, resistance, anger, and then moving into the proactive, we can think we're getting into the proactive stage, and then we didn't get that job that we interviewed for, and now we're kind of mad at the world again. And now we're kind of going, I think that some change is a little bit more linear and easier to see through beginning to end, right? You get sick, you start to get better incrementally. Some things don't always work out like that. You know, I had a coworker, she'd get cancer, and they'd rid her of cancer, and then she would get cancer again, and how much emotion she went through. And I don't want to compare things like they're apples to apples, but I think sometimes getting the job and you either thought you had a really good interview and it doesn't come out well, and now you're starting back at the beginning, or you get a job and you realize, man, this isn't my favorite job. Maybe I got to still keep looking for a job. There are things going throughout this process that are going to make you feel all of those negative things that maybe you felt at the beginning. So kind of be cognizant of that, be ready for it. Do you guys do anything to kind of get yourself back down to square one, to calm yourself down?
I watch my grandkids. That's all I do.
You watch your grandkids? Yeah.
It makes me feel super.
Yeah.
Centered.
David, what about you? Do you do anything? Do you have any?
I'm reading a book right now. So,
you're reading a book, yeah?
You know, it's a pretty interesting book, and get your mind off of things.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm older too, so my understanding of this thing is different.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've been through things, you know, where I thought it was the end of the world, but many times, most of the time, almost every time, it seems like wherever I was, I lost that job, I went for something else, I'm making better than if I'd stayed at that job, and everybody else who got left over there, they ended up in the worst case to me just by luck. It happened many times in my life. And so I'm thinking that just because you think something's good, you should shoot for it, or something. You have something you think it's good to maintain. You don't know this could be good in the future.
Yeah.
And it might be better that you go on to something else and you find out that you did better because something you didn't even know.
Yeah.
So that's generally what happens, is you end up with something that you like better, or different. You change your life. You become a bigger person. Like you know things now that you didn't know then.
Hello, so what's your name again?
David.
That was good advice. Thank you.
So
it's definitely what's happened to me. I don't know.
I'm going to repeat what David said real quick. And it kind of reminds me of this, the Walt Disney quote, right? So all the adversity I've had in my life, all my troubles and obstacles has strengthened me. You may not realize it when it happens, but a kick in the teeth may be the best thing in the world for you. Maybe not even as severe as a kick in the teeth, but like a change that we weren't expecting. So David, yeah, for those that maybe didn't hear, kind of said, and I hope you don't mind me sharing this, David, but basically the idea that, everything that maybe we thought, and I hope I'm repeating this correctly, that might not be the best thing once we got through that. So David said he's got, enough experience with these types of things that I think maybe it's not totally like the end of the world because he's seen it through to the end, right? We've already been through those terrible days or those bad circumstances, and we know there's light at the end of that tunnel. So David has some experience with that. And I think some of this class, I'm glad that you two are in here, but sometimes it's to catch those people that don't have experience with that stuff and think, this is God's indictment on my life and I'm never supposed to be happy and everything's bad. And so thank you for sharing.
I actually feel like I'm forced to come to these things. And every time, this is my second one, every time I came here, I actually felt better after I came here.
You actually felt better? Well, that's good. We got a good audience today for at least it being recorded. There are a couple videos that come in here. So this 7 habits, let me touch on this real quick.
And then last guy used to tried to make jokes nonstop that weren't funny, and you actually, you're more captive.
I'm funnier than he is?
No, not funny, but you're just, you're more interesting.
For the record, I am funnier. We're captive or something. So let's see. I don't know. This should hopefully have audio. I don't know. I had to type in YouTube. I did have a link, or I thought I had a direct link here. Just bear with me. That's maintain a positive attitude. We're coming in here. There are some videos that I don't always play. So I'm going to try to make sure this at least has some sound. I'm hoping it records good for the audience as well too.
There you go.
I remember my grandma's favorite story.
Well, where's your last job?
Well, that's I work for a company called Infosys. Infosys is an Indian company. I was a computer consultant. I do Oracle programming.
You didn't work right on the outskirts of downtown there, did you?
No, I never worked at that. No.
Because that was one of the places I actually interviewed at too during that little like layoff
That's a very
period.
small company. Apart it's a huge company. They don't have much of a footprint here. They
Yeah.
don't have any-
I work for a huge company. It's called Rock 10. They actually make cardboard boxes and print them. I worked on a press, and I also make the boxes. And that's what I did for
So guys, I'm a little bit worried about this sound really being effective for us in here. And I'm worried about how it's going to come through on the other end for our audience. So for our audience here that are listening to me, bear with me on that one. If we need to redo this at some point in the future, we can do that, try to integrate these videos in here. But I'll just mainly talk about this video. So if you want to revisit this video, you can look it up on YouTube. It's called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. Maybe Covey, maybe I'm pronouncing that wrong. But this gentleman has a lot of inspirational stuff on there. So kind of a big thing on motivational speaking and whatnot. And watching this video before, I think the big thing, he's saying be proactive. So we've already talked about being proactive up here. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. So being proactive as opposed to reactive. Begin with the end in mind. We've talked about that a little bit already. Those roadblocks that we might experience in life are a lot more likely to give you kind of a dead halt if we don't really know where we're going. You know, that persistence that a lot of people have, if they have that end goal, it's a lot easier to get to. And I think in these slides, he was even kind of talking about, you know, with our guy, there's like a little coffin here. Maybe you don't see that so well, but he was basically talking about how, you know, if you're on your deathbed, if you're at the end, what are the things that you're going to wish you did? Have you ever heard of people say they kind of live on regret minimization, you know, where they do things more so to where they're thinking, would I regret this in the future? You know, I think even who we got, Jeff Bezos. Jeff Bezos, when he started Amazon, I think he was working on Wall Street at the same time. And I've heard him talking about that, is he had a really cush job on Wall Street, right? Why leave that? And he just said, because he would have regretted never trying, you know, regardless if that happened. Not taking that leap of faith, right? And when we talk about that, I think a lot of people, there's a whole thing, and it's with tomorrow's presentation, but people tell themselves the same things when it comes to job search, you know, or when it comes to career transitions or career planning. I think some people tell themselves these things like, I can't start over. I've already, you know, I don't want to start at the bottom again somewhere. I don't want to go back to school. I'm too old, or I already got this specific degree.
5 weeks vacation.
I just got 5 weeks of vacation. There's so many different things. And in the past, I've had certain circumstances where I've thought about going and getting an advanced degree or something like that. And then I tell myself the same, no, I got to, you know, we got this mortgage, we got, you know, I got everything and I think that I sometimes have experienced when we go over those same things, that people that are quite a bit older than me, I'm telling myself the same things that they tell themselves. So at what point does it become a reality is when we kind of make it our reality. Here's, in this habit 3, put first things first. He's basically saying what's important to us versus what we do. You know, I think a lot of people would say their mental health is important to them, their physical health is important to them, but our actions don't always align with our ideals. And when we talk about goal setting too, because I kind of like to talk about this, because he was talking about, you know, how easy it is just to, you know, go home and watch TV as opposed to go home and go to the gym or anything like that. When we talk about SMART goals, you talk about SMART goals tomorrow. Have you guys ever heard of SMART goals before? Ever heard of the concept of SMART goals? So for those of us viewing at home, you can just go ahead and Google SMART goals. I probably have a handout somewhere, but SMART goals really, right? So Specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound. A good example I like to put towards that is right around that time of New Year's, right? New Year's wasn't super long ago, 3 months ago or so. What do people like to say they're going to do during New Year's? Maybe what are some of the big goals? What's up? Yeah, so what are goals? Maybe what are the common goals?
Losing weight.
I'm going to lose weight. I'm going to stop drinking. I'm going to stop smoking. I'm going to lose weight. I'm going to finally go back to school. 2020 is going to be my year. Psych. We got this virus. Anyway, I'll stop talking about the virus a little bit here. So the big thing in here, though, with the SMART goals, I think a lot of people tell themselves like very ambiguous goals. So in that example of that might be, I want to lose weight. That's not a very SMART goal, because losing weight means different things to different people. It's very open-ended. I kind of prescribe to the belief that if you didn't give yourself a deadline that you had to do something by, why would you do it? I had a big test not long ago in my life. I had a big test, something I prepped for. This was a couple years back, but I had a big test I was taking, right? And I at least made a plan for myself that I was going to study every hour for 2 months, or an hour every day for 2 months leading up to that test. Did I always get there? No. But those nights that I only spent 45 minutes or 30 minutes, or I fell asleep early, I at least knew it in the back of my head that I wasn't getting there. And an easy thing to say is rather than come in here and say, I want to lose weight, saying I want to go to the gym 3 times a week for 30 minutes
At least he's trying.
is a SMART goal. But this is kind of have you guys ever heard of the term, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, right? So things don't just always happen.
Say that again, what was it?
How do you eat an elephant?
One
One bite at a time. Because what people do is they'll say, here's your huge kind of overarching goal, right? That's your elephant. How do you even get there? Well, you're not going to finish this all in one sitting. That's the same thing with anything, with losing weight. And I think that's what Stephen Covey is really kind of preaching in here, is that it's easy. Let me get right back to it.
Where'd that come from? Where'd you guys get that from?
I don't know. I just remember things and kind of pull them out when I need to. But I think that's what Stephen Covey is saying in here, is that it's easy to think that monumental tasks are done kind of all at once, and it's easy to think that those little things that we do don't matter, when all it does matter is kind of the little things that we do. I think even in here he says, are you instantly going to become overweight and lethargic because you had a Mountain Dew at lunch today? No. And I'm not bashing anybody here that likes to drink Mountain Dew, but are those things, do they add up over time? So yes and no. So it's like people think the little decisions, yeah, it's a paradox because they don't make a big difference, but really it's all that matters. And then think win-win. I think a big one here, and this is going to be kind of Mitchell Tim's version, synthesized version of talking about this stuff, but think win-win. I think a lot of people think life is kind of a lose-win situation where if somebody has something, then that means it's taken away from somebody else, which, I'm not going to get political in here by any means. But a lot of times think win-win. And I think one of the things maybe to get out of your brain a little bit, and one of the things that I've had problems with, is you might look at somebody in your similar age group that you went to school with, that you had your last job with. You might think, why are they in that position? Why do they have that good job right now? Or why am I unemployed? Or why life isn't always, a give and take like that so much. So in his think win-win, he brought up an example of a guy that sold, let's say, a motivational book because he's a motivational speaker. And then he found somebody else's product online. Well, rather than go in there and bash his product, he endorsed it and recommended it. And there was a better feedback loop from that. They were now sharing the same clientele. So rather than think somebody else has to lose for you to win, it can be kind of like synergizing as well too. And that's what he means with habit 6 is synergize. Is we can oftentimes do more together than we could do alone. So he's saying, I think this example was 2 people picking apples off a tree. Neither one was tall enough. They get 0 apples. Putting their power together, they get 5. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. I think that whole idea is just listening, just trying to interpret more of what you hear, learn more about the world, and then sharpen the saw. Just about everything. He's talking about what do we have to do to make ourselves mentally fit or healthy individuals, and really master some of those skills we have. Even when we talk about, like David in here brought a book in today, reading for 15 minutes every day can over time, you know, after a year, how many books does that turn into that you've actually ended up reading? I remember I heard this scary thing one time about how many students, you know, after graduating from high school or post-secondary, how many do not read a full entire book front to back for the rest of their life? And it's kind of I can't remember specific, but it's kind of scary, or interesting at least. So 7 habits: be proactive. You are the force for positive action in your life. You have to look at yourself and change actions that aren't helpful. Begin with the end in mind. Decide what your goals are, or your destiny will be decided by others. Put things first. You have to do what's important before doing less important things. So they might be more fun, but don't procrastinate. I've heard of people doing, you know, do the thing that you dislike the most the first thing in the morning, because then you don't have to worry about it.
I'm gonna not procrastinate sometime.
Yeah, there you go. That's great. David's smart goal is to not procrastinate sometime soon, hopefully. And we all do. I think, you know, this stuff is not to make you seem like everybody's got to be robotic and everybody's going to be perfect, but, you know, stuff we want to think about. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. You have 2 ears and 1 mouth. Learn to listen to what others say before you're saying what you want. Synergize. You can go farther and faster with the helps of others. Sharpen the saw. Your mind and body are both you. And you know, I mean, when I said 2 years ago, I was taking that big test. When I was studying and doing different study materials, a big thing they said on there too is you got to get your best. You know, it's not always just about, you know, how everything is interconnected. I don't know if you guys like to exercise. It's getting a little bit nicer outside, but I find that can be astounding for mental health. You know, just exercise. What it also does, and this kind of comes up a little in a video a little bit later, but it teaches us that like our behavior matters, right? That there are repercussions of the things that we do every day. So we don't have a ton, much more going on here, guys. Slide Edge, and again, it's unfortunately a video I'm not going to be able to play. I think this is a Stephen Covey one as well. But the Slide Edge is kind of mirroring off these same concepts. So for those of us at home, or even for you gentlemen in the room today, I encourage you, I have a copy of the slides. We can always go back and look at this stuff if we need to. So Slide Edge, I'm at least going to get to the...
And not do it.
Yep, certainly. And I wish, you know, it was a better... So I'm going to see... So he was kind of talking a lot about that too. I think a lot of the stuff that I was explaining before is the same stuff where, you know, the fighting mediocrity, the not putting things off, that's kind of what that's geared towards. So I'll let you guys kind of watch that on your own. Again, apologize about the setup. Not sure if the folks on the other end would necessarily hear that one, and I'll let them do that at their own leisure. I am an Iowa Hawkeye myself. I am an Iowa graduate. Believe it or not, Mitchell Tim did not make this entire presentation himself, and I did not plug in the Iowa Hawkeyes here just to plug in the Iowa Hawkeyes, but so be it, they're here. But this is a big thing. You know, 2014 was my final year at the University of Iowa. They did decent. They were kind of incrementally getting better, but they said they literally, as a team, took this Slight Edge book and kind of broke it off into sections, and then, you know, each one was responsible for basically presenting a section or a chapter of that book to the rest of the group. And I think that's what it all kind of tailored down towards. And it's kind of reiterating myself quite a bit, but I think the Slide Edge is the big thing about, you know, all those things that we think aren't so important. Like, what time do you wake up in the morning? Do you make your bed? Do you grab the water instead of the soda? Do you go to the gym for 30 minutes? All those things that we know we could do, but don't always want to do. Those are the things that really make the difference. And they implemented a lot of these principles into kind of their regimen prior to their 2015 season. And if you watched every game up until the last 2 games of their 2015 season, it was a pretty good time. You know, hopefully you missed the Rose Bowl. I could have went without it, but regardless, they did a lot better that season. And Hawk Central, I know Hawk Central because I browse it a lot, so they're going to go in and talk more about the Iowa Hawkeyes if you guys are so inclined. You know, when I read this stuff, when it says stay in the green zone, we don't have a ton left today, guys, so bear with me a little bit and we'll get you through here. When they say stay in the green zone, really what I'm thinking, yeah, cool, stay empowered, all that good stuff. Sometimes when I think about this, and maybe it's just kind of like the inverted triangle I'm looking at, I think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Have we heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs in here? It's kind of where, you know, I keep bringing up this virus thing where, when we start to see the crippling of society and people, my coworker just told me she saw people fighting over rice at Aldi's, like literally ripped a bag open of rice at Aldi's. It's kind of like saying, so I think Maslow's hierarchy of needs is, we can get to being civilized. We can get to, being a part of community and everything. But now when we're scared of these base needs, all that stuff kind of goes away,
Toilet paper. My wife said she went to the store the other day and all the toilet paper's gone off the racks.
I've heard all the toilet paper's gone
I
too.
understand that.
I've heard all the toilet paper's gone to it's an abundance of caution. And what I'd really like to say today, and maybe it has some relation to what we're talking about, a self-fulfilling prophecy. Have you guys ever heard of a self-fulfilling prophecy? This positive attitude stuff, it can kind of, you're being super negative, could be a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you're the type of person that says, nobody's going to hire me because nobody wants, then it's so much more likely that nobody's going to hire you, right? Like if you approach, I'm going to go back to dating. So maybe if my boss is reviewing this, maybe they haven't gotten to my 5th mention of dating or anything like that. But that idea, if you go into a thing, she ain't going to like me, there's no way I got to show, well, you're probably not. What I think with this toilet paper and all that stuff, what it was like one wave of people that went and got all of their amenities and started stocking up quite a bit, right? And then that second wave of people said, oh my God, they're taking everything. I better go get mine because it's not going to be there. Well, now it's really not there because it's kind of like that self-fulfilling prophecy that everybody has. So, but regardless, I think it's kind of like, you can really see when people are not sure where their base physiological needs come from, if they're not sure where they're,
because they watch somebody else do it.
They watch somebody else do it maybe. But if people aren't sure where they're going to, am I going to be able to pay rent next month? It's a lot harder to think about anything else. When we get up to this top stuff, this love and belonging, this esteem, so this friendship, intimacy, family, esteem, respect, self-esteem, status, recognition, then self-actualization. If we're currently at fear of our employment, what's our personal security? What are our resources? There are things that help mitigate these circumstances, like having unemployment insurance, right? But we know that doesn't cover everything, and people are worried about health insurance and all these different things, especially throughout this time that we got right now. If we are bereft of those base needs, then we can't be up here. And I think other things that we could even think about, which makes our situations less comfortable. Anytime I've really developed good friendships since being out of school, it's based off the people I worked with. These are my people. These are my social groups. This is my circle. And not having those people in our life can also be tough. So not only do you not have these a lot of times physiological needs taken care of, we're not around our same social circles. It's almost like our sense of social identity. A lot of the times, that's who we are. That's how we introduce ourselves to people. That's what pays the bills. That's what keeps us afloat. So that's what I kind of think about when I look at this little inverted triangle here. So some stress management tips. I think I brought this up a little bit earlier, but just thinking about, I think David said he likes to read. Sometimes I like to go run or whatnot. I actually play water polo here in Des Moines. We have a water polo team, believe it or not. We have like a club team. We can't play right now because like all the Ys are shutting down and everything. So that's going to be a little bit tough. And I'm going to have to figure out, something else. But now it's getting a little bit warmer outside. Make sure you get outside. I definitely think that you should, block off time for yourself to do job search, but also give yourself something outside of that. Give yourself something, maybe a hobby or a new activity or something we can do to kind of keep us going throughout this time.
Well, about the virus, it is true that the sun has UV light in it, which has a tendency to disactivate the viruses.
Oh, really?
Viruses like cold and so forth.
Yeah.
And so, that's why it goes down in the summer months, because you get outside and light hits you. So, running in where there's nobody else around, when the sun's shining on you is good for you.
Yeah.
D3 is also good for that.
What's that?
D3 vitamin.
Oh, yeah.
D3 vitamin helps you give you energy, signaling you from your sun and stuff like that. That helps you get energy and happiness almost.
And you guys might have your own things too. I don't know. I think the tough thing is trying to figure out stuff that doesn't encompass spending a lot of money. Like I wouldn't encourage people in this class to go do a bunch of retail therapy. Some people like to do retail therapy and they do a bunch of shopping. Yeah. So figure out something, maybe to keep yourself occupied a little bit. So again, guys, this is like, we're right at the end here, right? So I'm gonna let you go a little bit earlier today. Different scenario. There's 2 folks in here. you know, and maybe not get an opportunity to watch all the videos, but I love this video. And we're not going to be able to play this one, or I'm not going to be playing it this afternoon. But I encourage you guys to go watch this TED Talk. Sean Achor is his name. It's a TED Talk. So if we don't know, I think it's technology, entertainment, and design.
Yep.
I think what TED Talks are geared around. TED, so TED. And there's a ton out there, and they're on so many different subjects. And here's what, and I like it. And what I can say is I watched this TED Talk, about a 10-minute video. So if we would have watched all these videos, we would have been in here at least till 2:45. A couple more people, we would have been here a little bit longer. But a TED Talk, this one at least, I really like it, and I think I can describe it decently enough. You know, I'm definitely not Sean Achor in here by any means. But this guy, I think he kind of, you know, we used to have this slide on our conflict resolution class thing, and it said, life is a journey, not a destination. You guys ever heard that before? It says, life is a journey, not a destination. And for some reason, for the longest time, that's something that I would hear, you know, people say, and it's kind of like, well, whatever. What does that mean? Like, life is 10% what happens to you, 90% what you mean. No, what is the practical implication of this? How do I actually make sense of this information? And I think he does a good job, at least, of making sense of that to me. And so what this guy did, Sean Achor, is he said he was a mentor. So he got into Harvard. So he got into Harvard as a kid, and he said he applied on a dare. He wasn't expecting to apply to Harvard, but his friend said, hey, you should apply to Harvard. Okay, dare me to apply to Harvard, I'll apply to Harvard. He got into Harvard. Well, it's kind of still a joke.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, it's kind of still a joke to him because he didn't have any money to go to Harvard. Well, then he got a military scholarship. All of a sudden, he's in Harvard, right? And he thinks, not expecting to be there, all these different things, that when he got to Harvard, he just thought everybody would be happy to be there. You know, kind of like he was, like everybody would be, what a privilege, what an honor, crazy that I'm here. And he said it was kind of like that maybe for a little bit, but then it went really quickly towards, now I got to compete with everybody here. I'm stressed. I got to manage, you know, all of my workload and all this stuff. So I think what his idea was, and what he says in here is, we've kind of pushed happiness beyond the cognitive horizon, meaning that when we hit a goal, all we do is change our goals. You know, so our whole kind of thought process up here is, you do something, now you got to get the next thing, right? So James over here has got a good job. We got to get a better job. You got a job with 4 weeks of vacation. Well, we're trying to get up to 5. You know, my neighbor got a nice truck. Well, I'm going to get the 2021 version next year, or whatever it might be. You hit your sales target, we're going to change your sales target. And that's the thing, you know, and that's what we kind of do. And I had a guy in this room one time that I think his quote was something like, the trick of life is not always getting what you want, it's still wanting it after you get it, right? So how many things do we not realize that we already have that maybe we're not as thankful for? But the way I kind of think about it too sometimes is, I remember being a kid, and I haven't been to Disneyland in a while. It's been at least 3 months. That's actually a joke, but that's actually a joke. It's been a long time. So, you know, so I was a kid, I was at Disneyland, and what they do is they have, just massive lines, right? It'll take you an hour, 2 hours. I don't remember all the specifics, but what they do is they don't show you the whole line. They have it kind of wind in and out and in and out. And it reminds me sitting there thinking, man, once I get up there and we're on the ride, it's gonna be fun. And then you get around that line and, oh my God, there's another line, you know? And I think that's what we kind of do. So Sean Achor just does a really good job of kind of talking about that. Like it's, you know, we think happiness always comes with the achieving something more, having something more, getting something more than we currently have. And it's not gonna happen like that. And he says we need to invert that. We need to invert that. We need to find ways to make ourselves more currently, presently focused, happy, without always focused on what that next big milestone was that we are going to accomplish. Because people who are happy are generally more productive, sociable, creative. They're better at problem solving, rather than when they're stressed and constantly worried about getting to that next point. And it's kind of this idea that people are giving themselves a benchmark where they're going to allow themselves to be happy. You know, even clients in my own program. Once I get a driver's license in my own place, I will be happy. You know, once I have this, once I get a new job, I will be happy. So I want you to think about that when you go through in your life moving forward. Why are you giving yourself a point in time that you allow yourself to be happy? And if that's the way we're living, we're probably going to once we get there, then we're just going to push that point off to the next thing. So he kind of brought up this thing called the 21-day challenge.
You're procrastinating on being happy then.
Everybody, yeah. So don't do that, right? So don't wait to be happy. So this 21-day challenge, and I've heard different things. You know, sometimes people will say 21 days to make a habit, 21 days to break a habit. I think that's a pretty common little saying right there. So when he was talking about kind of that thing, you know, we push happiness above the cognitive horizon. We're always wanting more and more and more. So how do we resolve that? And I think that's what he's thinking here is how do we make ourselves a little bit more happy in the present? And so he says 21-day challenge. I think I can bring this up probably for the audience out there. So 21-day challenge.
There's a YouTube thing we can watch. Could you write that down on my paper?
Absolutely. I also have a copy of the slides for everybody, and I can pass those out too. I might have.
So if I do all these 5 things, will I be happy?
You'll be the happiest guy in the entire world. I guarantee it.
That's exactly the opposite. You look happy already.
Huh?
That's the point now. That's exactly the opposite of what you just said to do.
How so?
I'm saying, if I do all these 5 things, then I'll be happy.
Oh, okay. I get you. Okay, you got me there. You got me there. Yeah, it's kind of a catch-22 right there. But how do we get a little bit more positive in the present mind? You said write down 3 new things. I think nowadays too, we're just inundated with the negative, you know, whether it's social media or whatever you read online. So, and how often do we complain, right? Rather than like revisit those things that went well throughout the day. So write down 3 new things. It'll improve your optimism even 6 months later. It raises your success rate significantly. And you're trying to kind of redevelop your brain to look for the positive rather than the negatives. Write for 2 minutes a day, describing one positive experience you had over the past 24 hours. This is a strategy to help transform you from a task-based thinker to a meaning-based thinker who scans the world for meaning instead of endless to-dos. Exercise for 10 minutes a day. So that could look like 10 minutes a day, 15 minutes a day. Maybe it's 30 minutes every other day or something. I don't know. So you can make your own SMART goals when it comes to that stuff. But this trains your brain to believe your behavior matters, right? So what we do matters. Life isn't kind of decided for us. Meditate for 2 minutes. You know, I got this nice little Apple Watch on, and about 7 times a day it says, are you breathing? Keep breathing. You know, even doing a minute of just straight, try to, you know, how often do we always have things going on? I'm sorry?
Is it connected to your phone?
It is connected to my phone. Yep. It tells me to breathe, just relax, how much that can kind of reduce anxiety, reduce stress. And then in the morning, write 1 quick email, maybe in the morning or first thing towards the beginning of your day. Significantly increases it basically praising a member or thanking somebody else. So this significantly increases your feeling of social support, which my study at Harvard was the largest predictor, not my study, so Sean Acor's. So also can work as a phone call or text message. So that was basically it. Nothing too crazy complicated. Again, encouraging everybody that's listening to me via audio to go back and look at some of these videos that maybe we didn't have the opportunity to go at today. Think about one thing I said throughout this entire presentation, and if you could just pick out one thing or maybe a couple things, what am I going to do differently? Am I going to go home and maybe think about some SMART goals? Am I going to actually try to work on this 21-day challenge stuff? Just what am I going to do maybe as a result from today or something that we talked about today that I can work on a little bit? So with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop recording the presentation.